Can everybody hear me? Meredith, you can hear me? Excellent, thank you. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. Despite the weather, we really appreciate being here to this poetry reading with Elena, Karina, Byrne. Before we get started, if I could just remind everybody to please silence your cell phones, electronic devices, whatever you've got that makes noise. Thank you. So our reading today is sponsored by Berry College and the Georgia Poetry Circuit. Without whose generous support and curation, none of this would be possible. In 1945, T.S. Eliot wrote that a poet must take as his or her material his or her own language as it is actually spoken around him or her. Elena Karina Byrne's poetry takes very much her own language as it is spoken around her, and it both plays with and extends that language, often connecting it to the language of her literary forebears. Byrne's poems are not afraid to name drop, to acknowledge their own provenances, and to twist their histories into new forms and adventures. They're also redolent with music, as in rock, where we encounter the lines, "No one said this brought burnt bread, cured blood, cobbled, but it does untroubled the iron from the jaw, lime from stone belt, igneous, him writ in a great cleft near its cliff, a crag, true Mediterranean fever broken, in the body gone blue." They're also rife with expert and lively imagery, as in rain. Felt it you have in your chest, pour down the ribs, respire from plants, fall to join itself, relief rain, orographic, lift meeting mountain with sea. Such lines invite the reader not only into a stunning linguistic jungle, but also into the physical experience of water itself against the body, of even what it means to be wet. Byrne's words like to spread out, to take up the whole page, and through them we are invited to learn about the history behind them and to enjoy pronouncing them with our own voices in order to best experience their sounds. We are excited and honored then today that Elena Karina Byrne is here to pronounce a few of those words herself. She is the author of 3 books of poetry, most recently Squander, is a freelance professor, editor, the poetry consultant and moderator for the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books, literary programs director for the Ruskin Art Club, and one of the final judges for the Kate Kingsley Tufts Prizes in Poetry. Her publications include the Pushcart Prizes Issue 33, Best American Poetry, the Paris Review, American Poetry Review, Tri-Quarterly, the Kenyon Review, Denver Quarterly, Slate, Poetry International, Omniverse, the Academy of American Poets Poem Day Series, Black Renaissance Noir, and Bomb. And she just completed Voyeur Hour, Meditations on Poetry, Art, and Desire. So please help me welcome Elena Karina Byrne.
Thank you, Emily. That was wonderful. I'd like to do introductions like that too. I love to do sort of book review style introductions. That's really fun. You stole a little tiny bit of my thunder because I was going to read Rain, which I will read. It was funny when he said silence your phones, and then he started to say, or any other electronical devices, and I started to think about, I wonder what other electronical devices we're going to have. It's probably not going to be that long before other electronical devices start to show up, and in our bodies, or on our bodies, or... And then it made me think, you were talking about, I think, the physical qualities of language, and you know, I am very involved in the physiology of the phrases, and I think language does begin in the body, and you know, that's a very important thing for me. It's a very physical process, and I often think of language as being like clay. It's something that's a problem-solving thing for me, something that I like to work with and play with. One of our poet laureates, Robert Hass, said, language is the movement of breath itself. So I think about it in that way. And we were talking earlier about Shakespeare because Robert Hass also in his interview with Bill Moyers in The Language of Life, he said actually Shakespeare was really, you could say in some ways Shakespeare was the one that gave us our language because you know, he perfected it in his plays and in his poems in giving us the human story. But you know that he also, and forgive me for the couple of you who were here in my talk earlier, he actually made up about 1,700 words, and even more than that, about 2,000 words and phrases. So you're already speaking Shakespeare, I mean, besides the fact that he gave us so many great stories. He actually invented the word obscene, hint, hurry, zany, gust, batty, dewdrop, courtship, glow, howl, leapfrog, informal, lonely, which surprised me, and successful. So you're also speaking Shakespeare when you say things like, kill me with kindness, all that glitters is gold, eat me out of house and home, he's a laughingstock, salad days, be all and end all, and what it is to be human. These are just some of the expressions that are Shakespeare. So you're already speaking Shakespeare. And as Stephen Colbert, the comedian, said, well, gosh, imagine though if nowadays you were doing that, you'd have to pay residuals for that. You'd have to pay someone to be using your language. So I guess I'll begin with rain, and then I'm going to start with something else. But I'm from Los Angeles, where it never rains, hardly ever, and right now we're having fires, so it's a little scary. I wish we could have some of this rain. It started with a weird quote. I love to cook, and I don't know if any of you have heard of MFK Fisher, but there's a quote from her. Once there were two brothers, they were twins, but their 9 mouths were all they had in common. And I guess I was thinking about how rain devours things, you know, and how it all becomes one big devouring body. Rain began with the rain in velvet swags. White doves flew from the pie, opened umbrella of spun sugar, rosebud colored. The face and face, each the liquor glass of it poured over the floating photograph. Felt it you have in your chest, pour down the ribs, respire from plants, fall to join itself, relief rain, orographic, lifting mountain with sea. Rain, shadow, region, error overhead, coming at you with wool gatherers, asking and asking until it's your hair, and your hair is soaked, shirt now second skin, undoing the rain's waistcoat around the house, mix lemon and oil and water to cook the books, raise the roof, revere, rolling the horizon toward the linden tree, or guando tree, carrying its cicadas in the machine shearing song, their sound like rain falling into the future thirst. Saturated like the hung laundry there, bringing in dog gusts and gale cats, the downpouring sentence. These, some of the one-word poems in here are sort of odd. They're kind of like, they started out as definition poems. I looked up the words and the origins of the words, and I called them fables, though, because then I started to make things up as I went along once I got the information. A lot of people ask me why I'm a poet, and my answer is I'm a poet because my parents were artists. My dad was a drawing teacher, and and he taught figure drawing. He also taught Disney animators anatomy. And my mother was an abstract painter, my brother's a painter. So a lot of my upbringing in my life began in images, and so many things were visual for me. So as a little kid, I really wanted to be able to translate my experiences, the things that I saw, with words. And then I also wanted to have my own art, so that's how poetry began for me. I really miss my parents. They're both gone now. And so this other poem, first poem, is about my mother. Now, who of you know who Magritte is? Do you know the artist Magritte? He's the one that painted himself with the apple in front of his face and the bowler hat. And he also is famous for painting himself looking in the mirror, but instead of his face, you see the back of his head. So he's a famous surrealist artist. And I learned something about him recently that I never knew. I thought I knew everything about him, but he actually forged money, and which is I thought was odd, and I didn't know that, maybe early on in his life. And then he also forged paintings. So I thought that was also interesting. Well, I think probably a lot of you will raise your hand for this. How many of you put your baby teeth under the pillow when you were a kid and woke up in the morning with money? Okay, yeah, there you go. All right, so. Magritte, oh, I wanted to mention one more thing. So the other thing that happened to Magritte, very unfortunately, in terms of his mother, she drowned herself when he was a little boy in the river. And when they pulled her out of the river, he unfortunately saw this, and her nightgown was pulled up over her head. So later on in life, he made a series of paintings that included this image. And there was this one painting that's famous, it's called The Lovers, and it's two people kissing each other, but their faces are covered in cloth. So that's also why there's a little bit of that in here. But it's about my mother. Magritte's forged banknotes. Mother is drowning there in an acre green ocean made from wet firing squad blindfolds. She is gone like money I can't stop giving away. She is gone except in the returning rhetoric of sleep. No one will ask you to turn your back to the mirror, to see yourself in yourself. The heart is more like one jellyfish pulsing in the hurting ribcage. No one will ask you. It's like money under the sand pillow when you sleep. You will wake with pulled baby teeth. No one will ask you to give her away to memory because she's already there, blindfolded by sea clouds on the event horizon. If you can paint anything, you can be someone else. You can repeat yourself. You can find your way back. Jellyfish have no brains. Mother, no more feelings now than the ones I remember receiving. I hang them like paintings on my ribs. I keep them like counterfeit notes when all bets are off. One for the ink rain day, one ink rain and dark day in case I crash like a mirror. Another artist, Georgia O'Keeffe. She had a really interesting life, and she was married to the photographer Alfred Stieglitz. And later on in life, she moved to New Mexico, and she'd originally grown up on a farm. And she was a very generous, spirited woman, and she let a lot of people into her home, and she really admired many other artists, including the Mexican-American artist Frida Kahlo. And then she donated her home later after she died as a museum. This is in her voice, Georgia O'Keeffe's first equivalent. I had to paint it. I was awake among the mountain. I felt them there. Cascade, alligator pears hanging close to my bedroom window, eyeing me brightly. I know the unexplainable thing accompanied by color. Forget the hazards that invert what I see. Sky above clouds, the body before feeling, before I need blue, accustomed to disagreement. The color grew as I painted. I withstood the day's equivalent to what I felt. This is what I had, bending my face this close to the mouths of flowers. The polished black tarantula wasps ticking across the bleached sand, legs like points of a compass, all math left behind. As if I think and see what you think and see the flower, I don't. Here, with that intangible thing in myself, all reenactment smaller and smaller in a black space, a blackbird flying, all was there, all was going away, green muslin rivers motioning, large rock seen from air, pelvis bones lie indoors and out, a door was painted many times, a dinner with pears eaten next to one of the many dead cedars in the countryside. The door was painted many times. The pelvis bones, you know, in the desert, they were always coming across like bones of animals that had died and then had dried, and so they would like see a jawbone of a cow or something, or a pelvis bone of some animal that had died, and so she would paint them. She's the one that painted those big, beautiful, sort of magnified flowers. How are we doing? I don't know if you've ever seen now I'm blanking on her name. I'll mention her in a minute. But she mostly talks. She hardly ever reads. She mostly talks at her readings. So I do a lot of research in my work. I have fun doing that. And a lot of poems are inspired by the research. I was talking about this earlier. And this is one of those poems. So you guys, we get earthquakes, you guys get tornadoes. And apparently, like when you, I don't know if you've ever seen that film Magnolia where they had a rain of frogs, but apparently there's been over time, there's been a rain of fish in different places. So apparently that has to do with a tornado coming and picking up a big gulp of water from a lake or a river or wherever, and then dropping it somewhere, and it might just happen to have a mouthful of fish. So the quote that inspired this poem is, "A rain of fish did actually occur in 1817 at Appin in Scotland. It consisted of a downpour of small herrings, a feat that nature repeated in 1830 at Islay and Ayrshire." And I looked up those dates and found a few facts that show up in the poem as well. I forgot to time myself over here. Fish mask from the water. As if common sense had a vendetta to persuade you nothing is as usual as it seems, that climbing the bone ladder from the heart up to the head, or better yet, from the head down to the heart, you see the slave of your logic using a child's red beach bucket to empty the sinking boat that carries you both out to the center of the Atlantic, where you see the blue palazzo with women wearing white dance to Rossini's Cinderella, and you see the Loch Ness Monster, green hair of Neptune, and you hear bagpipes leading the wind. Now a storm is brewing in your mind, and your bad behavior comes back to haunt you like a daily cup of strong tea, like the ambition of pleasure. But nothing is unnatural if you think about it. If Bible or Buddha says so, sky traded for sea, the shining multitudes of fish bodies raining down around you, a live alphabet. This is the same year we introduced, perpendicular to the vocabulary of architecture, the year Baron John Berzelius discovers lithium. You can almost count backwards, as if dreaming, and then you are lifted by an air funnel past the persistence of dawn, past this Gaelic word, ice for fish. This is what you get for not thinking straight. Can you blame anyone? Perhaps this is just the religious life raised up somewhere from the sea and carried to land in the black body of some cloud, tiny silver herrings like so many polished chrome scales of a god stealing light. You see them fall, pristine armies driven off his back like rain to writhe at your feet, drown on air. Tonight, you do not know why. Tonight, when you sleep, you will breathe water. Yes, you will. Like an actor, I like to imagine not only entering different roles and different voices, but I like to visit other places. Anybody believe in ghosts? I don't know if I do. I've never seen one. Except in my mind all the time. No, I'm kidding. This is called the Ghost Disparity Mask. You've put it on for no one. The long night is about to get longer. There's a baritone color to the upstairs rooms, a papered smell of birds flying. Under the floorboards, someone is preparing for eternity, an incomplete occupation at best. This is as grateful as you get. Numberless music from the furnace, wardrobes, closed boundary, the South's cotton field beds rising above you in a confusion of goose down and islet. The cupboards are suddenly crowded with shattered green glass. A vine winds the iron staircase despairing. You kneel upon an opened book, feel this misunderstood beside yourself, bedside mannered and cautioned to look into a mirror. Nothing disappears as fast as the face. Right now, you are as close as the cold, filling the bathtub with your white hair, funeral pyre of you set on fire, the crisp synonym of ashes fallen from your mouth. There's no conclusion to what one feels. Hear yourself breathe, because you are your own grave company at last. Boom. I had a lot of fun with this book. It was, they were all persona, so it gave me the freedom to just write about anything and pretend, you know. So it's a lot harder for me to write about reality. I was talking about this earlier, but I've been forcing myself to do that lately. I'm going to read a few poems that are about real life, a little more about real life. And when I was 9, my half-sister died speaking of rain, in one of the rare California rainstorms. She married way too young. She was 17, and by the time she was 26, she had a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old. And she came to visit us with her husband and her children. And then that night she went home, they all had dinner, and then she went out to a photography class. and the wedding party, and she never came home. And the first poem, I have two poems I'm going to read about that. The first poem is a more literal poem about that, and the second poem is sort of a much more figurative poem about my grief about it. This is called Deliberate as Thinking is the Rain. Stepping off the door lintel down onto the grass as the day closed around us, grass rising up around its own squared green. She walked backwards, slow full length the lawn to the blue Volkswagen Bug, waved and folded herself inside where her husband and two children waited. No smell or sound in memory-stranded interior. I don't think she smiled. Mouth closed, hair loose, hands facing Mother and me. Nothing else is moving. And the sky is so far, an abstract irrelevance. I stared and stared back for as many years as I could stand. Her escaping face in its stages of flowering and deflowering from the frame, since it was the last time afforded us her face, its pale proof and myth, its core of rain held off from the picture now black and white beneath us, and that full body of trees remaining years into spine, in thigh, into skull, into lungs, hair flickering out like reversed candlelight in the river stir, rain kicking itself back into radio static and dragged chair. Her father's, my father's lynched cough down the hall. She told Mother at the beach that she saw herself buried in a dream in the water years before. Her children like pendulums hung from the singing mast of her own voice. She would go out alone to a class and a wedding, the sky bearing its impatient weight over her, and everything that could be named there. In its random order, the rain would then come that night, hard, flooding on a year in a place where rain never rains, or raises cars, or shapes a silence in its loud punishment, metal scrawl across its own carnal ambition, but would and did and made moan and cage and bad of it. So there's an artist named Rachel Whiteread who really, from Britain, who's really strange. Instead of making like casts of heads or animals, she would make casts of negative space, like the space under a table or a whole room. Like she would love to cast the space between those two pillars. She also loved working with boxes originally, and she was very fascinated with what happened with boxes. And that's why you'll see I used this in my poem about my grief, about my half-sister dying. Rachel Whiteread, it's so you could almost lick the sugar cubes stacked in sleep. Find the hexahedron arc floating today's ocean, missing its human animal leaving home. Grief is an impression of a missing table under the table. A body withdrawn from the body, floating, the color of Halloween candy wrappers. I lived a whole afternoon under the leftover houseboards in our dying garden after my one sister died. Half-sister, half-death of my thinking about death at 9. A black hole can be measured by the sheer speed of what is orbiting around it. If you withdraw one object from its space in a room, measure what's left, all the empty part, you have a child inside a box thinking outside itself. Let's see. This is an artist that we knew. His name is Jack Goldstein. He was a painter. He started out as a video artist, though, when we first knew him, and a performance artist. So he used to do weird performances, which you'll here. Where is dead artist Jack Goldstein? The mother has locked the yellow bathroom door to protect the child from the father. California trees everywhere at all heights unaccounted for. A foreground from which to climb, to escape, where the one purple dark will be made, where lightning strikes before a horizon and a building is caught, where cut grass keeps its intractable position all the way to the adult artist asking my mother about our caged minor bird. Drugged, still in slow motion, he's smiling indigo's heel of black. In his films, the far right door slams over and over just before a man running gets there. The MGM lion roars and roars. Now, one light bulb flickers in the dark with his heartbeat 6 feet above ground, above the buried man, him, listening. A bare pipe from which to speak down like the ear canal of God. Jack's name is repeated over and over out loud. This intimate interaction repeats all night. His chosen center of earth is unimaginable. I knew Jack when I was a child, right before I was an adult, when he stopped making films, when he was painting, paintings much larger than bathrooms that knew the wing-splitting cold light from the sky. Bathrooms in the home are not closed coffins from which to hear the outside world speak your name. He was unfortunately a drug addict his whole life, and he just couldn't get past it, and he ended up committing suicide. Okay, I had a student in one of the other readings. She said, "Do you have any happy poems?" So maybe I'll take a break and read the happy poem. And I will refer to my dad, who, as I said, was an artist. But he grew up on a farm. He was 20 years older than my mom. And he grew up on a farm in California. And obviously before he was an artist. He actually went to school with John Wayne. And he used to joke that John Wayne was a better footballer, but he was a better boxer, things like that. And he was an autodidact, and he taught himself most things, and he was constantly reading and very articulate, very professorial. He kind of looked like Einstein, but with much more handsome, with long hair, and he was really amazing. But every once in a while he would come out with really crazy swear words, like he'd say pig's eye instead of bullshit, or he would say Jiminy Christmas, and I would pick up these funny swear words. So then I decided to write about this, and then I looked up pig's eye, and I guess the original expression is in a pig's eye. And I thought, that's just so weird. Where did that come from? Pig's eye. Idiomatic, those for granted, idiosyncrasies taken to heart. Pig's eye, father said with true authority. A favorite phrase or set of swear words I never understood. Why the pig's eyes? Surely the pig had other body parts that would promise a better insult, the afterlife of disturbance about the one it was said to. To what bristly hide, short-tailed and to a point, what mobile snout, cloven-hooped are we referring? He put his foot down. Certainly not, the dictionary reads. In other words, a final denial to the brown eye of the pig, whose circumference is the size of a button on a man's business suit. Second son of a tree feller, my father, the artist on the farm of sorts, therefore knew his pigs well and our fondness of disgust for them. Domesticated, greedy, obstinate animal who knows the indignance of the future. I admit I prefer animals as a better part of the species of speech. What else could fall out of the missing mouths of guardian angels and small children? Who else could mix our metaphor, keep us warm at night? Out of a parenthesis, a daughter misses in her memory. Parental cant, argot of childhood, dialect of urge, consumer jargon, parlance paid for in advance, and the simple act of a pig's eye upon you. I never really learned how to swear right, but I can talk myself into a whole man-made course and stand my ground, a muddy one of sorts. From this thin air perspective, from the sweet, unequal word given, I am dragged that much closer to Shakespeare, to the salty earth, outweighed by all animals in our thinking, and so grateful for it. So if I'm deficient to believe that the only insight seen is the whale's gaze upon infinity, then I shall keep my eyes open, keep my eye out for it when it comes, the perfect insult for the pig's swill of words available. I'm put to the sword, put to the task, to the tongue every day, because Father made me part animal, one word at a time. Okay, that's about as happy as I get. No. I do a couple of sort of happy poems. I'm saving one for last. How are we doing? Let's see. How long has it been?
40 minutes.
What?
About 40 minutes so far.
It's been 40 minutes already?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I really didn't turn the clock on. Okay, then I'm gonna, I will end with 2 poems then. 2 poems. Morning, I guess. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. And I didn't really read any of my really angry poems, which I guess is good. Let's see. Oh, you're probably disappointed I didn't read any of my angry poems, right? I'm kidding. Let's see. Actually, you know what? I think I'll read that poem that you quoted. The rock poem has a little bit of oomph to it. So that was one of the research poems that I did, and I didn't know. You know, it's one of the poems that you don't really know where it's going, but it was fun to do the research. And when I was doing my research, because I was thinking about like also the expression of like what rock did you crawl out from under, and then I was thinking, you know, a lot of bugs live underneath rocks, and then I just was doing a little research about bugs, and I came across the fact that there was the scientist Charles Henry Turner from 1876 to 1923. He was an African-American scientist, neurologist, zoologist, psychologist, and educator. And he was the first person, I love this, he was the first person to discover that insects could hear and that their behavior can be altered based on previous experiences. So in other words, when you chase that cockroach and he disappears, he's going to remember that. His behavior is going to be altered. So that's who Charles Henry Turner is. Boy, what amazing. Rock, while your self-smitten split like a skull face, a killjoy guilty of hidden tattoo, blow for blow, sand multiplying miles, more a measure apart, an apocalyptic paradise. No one said this brought burnt bread, cured blood, cobbled, but it does untrouble the iron from the jaw, lime from the stone belt, igneous hemorrhage in a great cleft near its cliff of crag, true Mediterranean fever broken in the body gone blue. A Petra derived, abyssal plain seen, where you arrived heavy with soil, where a drunken carved boat sank, its salt bedding made, where Charles Henry Turner's ticking insects could hear. Finishing what it started, I assure you, no one else can revoke your first thought where you now stand. So abyssal plain is are the plains underneath the ocean and apparently cover 50% of our planet. Pretty amazing. So the other fact about insects that I didn't know is that bees can dream. Did you know that bees can dream? How they know that, I don't know. But again, I was doing a little bit of research and I saw this comedian, the gay Australian comedian Hannah Gadsby. And some guy came up to her after one of her shows and said, you know, because she mentioned something about taking antidepressants. He said, "Hey, you really shouldn't be taking antidepressants." He said, they might dull your senses or they might change your comedy. And she's like, what are you talking about? You know, they also keep me alive, you know. So, and she said, did you know that Van Gogh had to take medicine for epilepsy and some other things, and that was one of the reasons why his colors were so wild and vibrant. It was why the sunflowers were so yellow and that color because of the drugs that he took. And she said, and that's not funny. The guy, anyway, so I thought, there's my poem. But that's not what the poem's about, so. And thank you, again, this is my last poem. That Van Gogh was on drugs wasn't funny, the comedian said, which is why, oh shoot, one other thing, sorry. Now I am like Heather McHugh. Do you know what the Fibonacci number is? It's like when you add the first two numbers and then you get the next number and you keep adding them up there, it's a sequencing of numbers that exists in nature. So they exist inside of sunflowers. And they also it exists in an artichoke, in a pine cone, in a conch shell, and in the universe. It's this sort of miraculous thing. That Van Gogh was on drugs wasn't funny, the comedian said, which is why his sunflowers' yellows were so very yellow in their deliberately askew heads. And from there now, I know too bees can dream, which must be a kind of drunken wavering from the sun, dizzy parallax of dance to dance, flower color, crowned in the mouth's epiphany, carried home. Hives, hexagon, sunflowers, Fibonacci. Love is like this, precise, yet so lawless, once let loose inside the body. All Nile and noontime, black seed and spiral, to a hint of foreground yellow paint between the teeth. I desire something new every day, like his later alterations wet from another's hands, placed so very carefully over me with an unleashed look of light. That is where we know nothing but sunflowers. We become a different version. Thank you. So yeah, he did lots and lots of versions of the sunflowers, but I think only one sold for $50 million, something like that.
Well, we have a few minutes here for questions and answers from anybody who would like to do that. And then when we're finished with that, we've actually got some of Elena's books in the back for sale. She can sign this for you if you like before you leave. But first, any questions that you might have?
Oh, yes?
All right, what was the longest you researched something for a moment?
Oh, gosh. You mean how long did it take, or?
Yeah, like how much research did you put into something?
Well, quite a bit. I mean, like I guess I did quite a bit for Squander, but for Mask, I had a lot of books. I mean, one of my favorite books is the oldest version, not the newer version, but the old version of the Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fables, because it's like a word origin book, but it has weird, like, stories in it for the words. And then it leads you to another story, and then, like my mind, and then it leads you to another story, and I love that. But I'm wondering, I can't really answer that question only in that if I was doing research or something and I was writing it down, I often keep notebooks where I like cut out pictures and I write down notes. And so if I was writing down notes, I might have been writing down notes off and on for days or periods of time. And then before I would, like an athlete warms up, I would be warming my brain up before I would finally sit down and write the poem. I often am kind of a binge writer, and then I would often write in big bursts, and then I would go back and revise later. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't. I don't know if there was any one particular poem that was more difficult than others. In terms of research, because a lot of my research is accidental. Sometimes just a word or a phrase or another poet's quote or something will spur me on, will instigate my wanting to write. And as Stan McCunitz used to talk about it, so I often don't know what it is that I'm going to write about until I start writing. And then once I start writing, the subject matter starts to show itself. I'm sure I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but I once heard the story about a novelist who, this is obviously before computers, who had just finished her novel and she was on a train and she left her novel on the train and then she told her friends and everybody was so upset and they said, well, you can remember a lot of it, can't you? And you can write it again, can't you? And she says, no, I know what happens now. So I love that idea. So sometimes it's like that for me. I mean, sometimes I will address myself specifically to a subject, like the pig's eye one, or the prose poem that was about my sister dying. But often I don't know what it is that I'm going to be writing about. Anything else? I also paint. I have in the old days, writers weren't just writers, they had other professions, and as I was saying, I have a student who was a student that I had at USC, and I insisted that she continue working for this businessman so she could make money, and she's a pretty successful poet as well, so I was happy that she didn't just do the poetry thing. But then the other thing too is, I think you guys, you're the generation where there's a lot of crossover of the arts. There's a lot of crossover of professions too. I know my daughter is like mixing design with science, with all kinds of things, and so it's kind of hard to define what she does. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like those options are more open to you? And then I know, a lot of actors are also musicians. Actors are politicians. No. Who knows? Maybe our next president will be a scientist or a doctor. Yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing? I want a deep sea biologist president. That's what I want. My other favorite subject.
Anybody else?
Taxidermist president. Anna Byrne could be president. She loves taxidermy. She actually took taxidermy. Yes. Hi.
So you'll have to forgive this question, but we have a tradition, and it started when Jericho Brown came to read at the campus.
Oh, yeah.
And so we ask this question to every reading. You don't have to have an opinion, but what are your opinions on Beyonce?
Oh, Beyonce? Oh, I love her. I mean, I think she's an amazing singer. She's beautiful. I don't know. Do I have any other opinions? Let's see. Maybe there's things about Beyonce I don't know that I should know. Is that a trick question? Well, you can ask me about other musicians. Let's see. Oh, okay. I've never seen her in concert. I've seen a lot of concerts, but I've never seen Beyonce in concert. You guys know who Sufjan Stevens is? Anyone know? He's kind of an odd. Yeah, my son saw him in concert. He said he had giant, like, blow-up things that showed up on stage, and all kinds of odd things happened. I once saw, I was lucky enough to see Robert Bly read, and he got an apple dulcimer, and then he repeated things, and he said, "Did you get that?" And then he thought maybe we didn't, so he said the poem again, just in case. I thought that was pretty cool. And then when he signed his book for me, he drew a deer. He called me Eager Deer. Tess Gallagher once read for me, and I think it was the year her book Portable Kisses came out, so she brought a big thing of lipstick and she kissed every book as she signed it. Sort of fun. Speaking of crossover, yeah, I would love to also be a performance artist. I'd love to be a deep sea biologist. I would love to be an astrophysicist, although I'm horrible at math. But I would love to study the stars and deep space, and I think it's wild and incredible. My daughter gave her, when she was in second grade, her science project was black holes, so we had to try to make a black hole. Come on, somebody ask something. Or let me ask you something. Somebody tell me what you're interested in, what you want to be or do, which may change during your life, no doubt. All right, so then you should find Wendell Berry. There you go. We just did a big event on Wendell Berry, and there's an amazing film. Have you seen the Wendell Berry film? Isn't that amazing? So Wendell Berry is a poet, but he also, writes about many of the things that he's a nonfiction writer, and he was a farmer. Really, really amazing person and cool. And what we at the Ruskin Art Club considered him a modern day Ruskinian. Cool. I think farming is incredible. I try to farm a little bit, even in my garden in LA in Laurel Canyon. I grow herbs and vegetables as much as I can, as much as the deer and the raccoon and squirrels will allow me. What else? The other day I asked people what they wanted to study or what they wanted to be and what they wanted to do, and nobody would answer. Finally, one girl raised her hand. She said, "I want to make money." So I said, okay, money, freedom for me to travel, to go see the world and see places. I mean, it's been for me the most exciting, amazing thing to see other countries and other cultures and to eat other foods. And so, yeah, if I could have lots of money to do that, that's what I would do. I would do a lot of that. I'm going to definitely be spending a lot of time doing that. I do it in my head and in here all the time, but to do it in real life and it's always surprising, and people are always so warm and wonderful. But I'm always surprised at able to figure out ways to do it. She would get one-way tickets and then she'd work in the countries that she'd go to. Or she'd get a really cheap around-the-world ticket, and then you can travel over a year's time and take your time. You know, there's ways of doing it. So, my advice as a poet. All right, guys, thank you.
Thank you.